Hello, this is Liberty Mark 222. I've been studying some demographics in the United States. I'm trying to get a handle on the different age groups and whatnot. And what I've been studying, there's kind of a lot of discrepancies between who's in the baby boomer generation, the Generation X, the millennials or Generation Y, and I guess the next generation. And I was just studying these different groups. Now, my parents' generation is kind of like the Depression babies, and they're starting to call them the silent generation. And that generation never got a president. Now the generation before them, the ones in the 20s, there was about 7 different presidents that were born about that time. Basically from about Kennedy. From about Kennedy all the way to George Herbert Walker Bush. They were all like babies born from about 1910 to 1925. Some of them were born in 24. So we got about 7 presidents then. And then in the Depression era, they didn't have a single president. The next president that came along was Clinton, and he was born in 1946. So you had you got Clinton and Bush, George W. Bush, George Bush Jr. He was born in 46, and you got Obama. He's born in 61, and so you got 3 presidents that are born during the baby boom generation. Now, if you kind of look at the different generations, it's easier to look at them from a presidential perspective. Like in the Bible, it talks about how what king was in what year and how long they reigned and stuff. And that's a good way to kind of divide up the different generations. And I kind of look at like the baby boomers basically from the time of Truman, about 1945 till the time of John F. Kennedy. That was about 1963. So 45 to 63, that's about 18 years. And that's about 80 million people right now. Maybe a little less. The only data I had was 2000. I couldn't find 2010 data, census data, as far as the different age groups and the different years and stuff, the population. And then the next generation after that, the Generation X, is basically from Johnson, Lyndon Johnson's, which is in 63. He took over when Kennedy got shot, till about you had Johnson, you had Nixon, Ford, and then Carter, and that's till about 1980. It's about 1963 to 1980, and those are all kind of a lot of turmoil. You had the Nixon resigning. You had the Vietnam War, all the different people getting assassinated. You had Kennedy and his brother Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King. All the racial strife, all the protests as far as the Vietnam War and stuff. And then in 1980, with Reagan, there was a big change. It seemed like the Americans got their confidence back up. Remember the Miracle on Ice up in New York, where the amateurs beat the Russian skaters? It just seemed impossible. the whole thing with Reagan, and then how he boosted up the military and made everybody feel good about America again. And that's like the millennial generation from about 1980 to about 2000. And so that's about 20 years. And that's about 80 million people. So that's actually bigger right now than the baby boom generation. So what I'm looking at, and then you have after 2000, you've had a drop off on the number of births. Actually, you had a real drop off in the Generation X from about 1963 to 1980. There's a real drop off in births, and then from 1980 to about 2000, we had a big boom in the number of children born. So the millennial generation is gonna affect this country the same way the baby boomers have. The baby boomers, everybody's talking about, oh wow, everything they did and touched, it really was affected and changed. Well, in the same way, the millennial generation, the ones born during time of Reagan and Bush Sr. and Clinton, you're going to have a huge change when they kind of fully get in power here. Their generation, they've already started impacting this country a lot, but it's also when pretty much the last of the millennials, let's say they're born in 2000, so when they turn 18, so that'd be about 2018, that's pretty much the full political strength of that generation right there. So I would expect, they're already affecting the elections, but I would expect in the next election in 2016 that they're going to really start impacting it, especially since the baby boomers are kind of retiring and dying out, so how is that going to affect the United States? How is it that the power being taken? See the Generation X, there's only about 60 million people in Generation X. They're not going to have the same kind of power as the millennial generation, and they've been overshadowed by the baby boomers too. So you're going to have kind of a big change in the power. Now the baby boomers basically really started affecting elections. I think the first election that they really affected was John F. Kennedy. And John F. Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson, Lyndon Johnson had the big Great Society and started welfare, really increased the war on poverty, and started the big war in Vietnam. And it really affected our country a lot. I look at Johnson as actually really changed this country in a lot of ways. And in the same way Reagan did. Reagan really changed this country in a lot of ways, and he had a very impactful presidency. And I look at probably this next generation, when the Generation X, when they start flexing their political muscle, it could really change this country in 2016. It could be, I look at this millennial generation as they're much more pragmatic. They're not ideological exactly. They're used to fighting wars. their generation's been fighting these wars in Iraq and Afghanistan for 10 years. So I don't see them. They seem very smart, I guess, in a sense. They're not going to be deceived, kind of like the way that maybe the baby boom generation was deceived. I think the baby boomers are much more idealistic, and I mean, you can look at what happened in the 60s, how we had all those riots and stuff. We don't really have those kind of riots. We had the march on Wall Street, against corporate greed and stuff, but that was pretty short-lived. I don't see their generation really protesting that way. So anyway, I'm just kind of analyzing and discussing like the different demographics of the United States. So this is Liberty Mark 222. Thanks.